Thank you. Yes, I've been practicing Chinese medicine for 33 years, and one of the book that I wrote, actually Lillian encouraged me, recommended me to the publishing company, and then they wanted me to write a book on this. And it's basically based on how I've approached over 33 years in my own practice. And we all start off a certain way, and then as we evolve, we get in, more into other aspects. And I came into Chinese medicine through food. I was a chef for many years, and it was through my working with food that I wanted to study Chinese nutrition. And in studying Chinese nutrition, I ended up studying Chinese medicine and got my master's in California in 1991. I started working with Lillian Bridges in 1999 when she first came to Ireland to do a workshop here. Michael and myself had an institute where we brought people in. And from that point on, I started to study with her, and I would go over and stay with her and work with her and study. And if anybody you don't know Lillian, she's was the top world face reader of Chinese medicine. And she learned from her parents. It was something passed on, and her grandparents. And it was traditionally always passed on to the male of the families in China. But because she was the only one out of all her cousins that had an interest in it, they taught her and passed it on to her. And the area that I got involved with her is in the area of diagnosis, which I'm going to use some of it in this because I use facial diagnosis in my practice all the time. It's one of the main tools I use when I'm doing a consultation and diagnosis. And Lillian wasn't a practitioner, but she understood the face and understood where the organs were in the face. So with me and a few other practitioners, we worked with her to kind of consolidate and develop the area of diagnosis. Now, I do face readings generally as well, in all aspects of it, because I ran her institute for until she passed away with another colleague, Kelly. And so I'm going to, when I talk about, so with Yang Shang, it's very much, it's the tradition of nurturing life. And I think as practitioners of Chinese medicine, this was the original thing that we used to do. You look at the person in front of you and not the condition. And I think this is a really important thing to say, because I think as we have progressed as practitioners and as our medicine has become more accepted in certain levels, we constantly try to align ourselves with Western medicine in order to be accepted. And there is a worry in that, because the more we align ourselves with the Western diagnosis, the less we focus on the actual person in front of us and our own Chinese diagnosis. And I think as herbalists, we have a great advantage, because using herbal medicine, we have to look at the individual person in order to be able to modify the formulas to suit that condition and that person. But with acupuncture generally, I think sometimes we might lose that a little bit. And I do think it's a really important thing, because, somebody comes in with gastric ulcer, or somebody comes in with a thyroid problem. We look at it from a very different perspective, and there are herbs that are good to do this, but we need to always look at the person's lifestyle, their work. When it comes to nutrition, do they cook? Do they know about certain foods? Do they buy ready-made foods? Do they have to feed a family as well? What kind of work do they do? Is it very physical? Like if they have a condition that a muscular problem or a joint problem, and they work very physically, then that's counterproductive to trying to get them better. So there's many levels of somebody's life that we have to look at. What is their mental, emotional balance? How do they interact with the world? How do they see themselves in the world? You know, and then we have interferences that we can't, like the principles of Yang Shang were developed thousands of years ago, and we live in a very different world than it was thousands of years ago. We have lots of modern things we have to deal with. And so what I'm going to try and do is, so for me, when a patient comes in, my intake is really important, my consultation. I want to know, what do they do for pleasure? What do they do that's just for them, that they get lost in time, that they just rejuvenate from? A lot of people don't have that. It's actually quite interesting, and that's really important for every part of our being, because we are creative beings and we need to express that. And then you have, and then I want to know about their diet, and I'll go into that because I think food is really important. And when we look at these principles of Yang Shang about nurturing somebody's life, we want to help them find balance in their life again. So we do our diagnosis, they've got their condition, and then what we want to do is we want to encourage them in different areas within their lifestyle, how they can help their recovery as opposed to just getting the treatments. Because there's lots of things people can do, and some things is very difficult. People can't make big changes sometimes. You know what I mean? It's difficult for them. Sometimes it can be financial, sometimes it can be just their economic, their social situation or whatever. So what we have to do is look at what they have and what they can do to make those changes. So for instance, if somebody buys ready-made food and they don't know how to cook, you're not going to start telling them to start steaming their broccoli and cooking quinoa and doing all these things. You're going to, what I would do is go, okay, what do you buy? And then try to guide them into better products, because there are more natural products that are ready-made out there. So you're kind of getting them on a path. You're sort of adjusting them a little bit. And I always work on the principle of not overwhelming my patients. I used to do that a lot when I first started. You know, I was a vegetarian and I was into all this and the nutrition, and you have to not eat this and don't eat that. And I put a lot of pressure on my patients. And I realized that actually I was actually setting them up for failure, because they thought they could do all these changes and do all these things, and as soon as they didn't, then they were hard on themselves again. And they're already overwhelmed because they've got some condition and they're coming for a treatment. One of the main, so Yang Shang came from many thousand years ago, but it was Sun Si Miao in 581 to 682 AD in the Tang Dynasty, who really understood the principles of Yang Shang and wrote an awful lot about it and tried to instill this aspect of Chinese medicine. Now, he wasn't a practitioner, but he was a learned man and a researcher and a gatherer of information. And he was known as the king of medicines, of medicals. The emperor and everybody consulted with him. He actually also understood the importance of women in Chinese medicine, in health, and how important women were. And up until the point when he wrote some of his own books on gynecology and pediatrics, women's health were at the back of most of the ancient texts. You know, you had all these ancient texts on all these conditions, and at the very end, there'd be maybe a chapter on women's health. And what he would say is that if a woman is healthy, the offspring will be healthy, then everybody will be healthy. And so he put women at the beginning and wrote whole texts on women's health. So I'm a big fan of his. He was very revolutionary in his time and forward thinking. But he also would say that the first step to treating a person was to guide them in Yang Shang, so guide them in the principles of nurturing their own health and their own lifestyle, and then in diet, and lastly to treat them with herbs if this wasn't adjusting. So, you know, I remember when I first was reading some of his stuff, I remember I had somebody ring me up looking for an appointment, having trouble sleeping. He said, like, I wake up, I sleep well, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm exhausted, like no matter how much I sleep. So I'm on the phone chatting to him, and I just happened, don't ask me why, asked him, did he eat anything before he went to bed? And he said, well, I get into bed and I read my book and I have a piece of chocolate. And I thought, okay, chocolate, sugar levels go up, your body is awake, but you're asleep, you know, the whole thing. So I said, stop it. I gave him an appointment for a week later, and I said to him, stop eating the chocolate at night time. He rang me 3 days later and he said, I wake up refreshed since I stopped the chocolate. It was one little thing. Do you know what I mean? It was just, now that's not always the case, but it made me realize that actually, yes, sometimes it's little things can be adjusted. It doesn't have to be some big thing. And if we miss that, then we could be treating them for something, you know, to help them sleep, but it's not going to help them if they're still eating the chocolate before they go to bed. I said, eat the chocolate after your dinner or, you know, earlier in the day, but don't eat it before you go to bed. And so I just became fascinated with this whole approach to, you know, looking at somebody's life. We all have our own constitution, so we all come in with our own constitution. And in face reading, the belief is, and it is in Chinese medicine, that we have a destiny. We have our Ming, our own Ming, which is our destiny in this life. And if you look at the characters of the Tao actually is a face running on a path. And some of the oldest texts that were ever found are actually of meridians on the face, the first meridians, points on the face, but also an age map. And Paul Ulchin has it in his book. Lillian has it actually in her book as well. He gave her permission to use it. But it's one of the oldest maps of acupuncture, and also showed that face reading was a big part of Chinese medicine a long time ago. And it had 150 ages on the face. So people potentially lived to 150 in those days. I mean, the Chinese are obsessed with longevity. And so, you know, they were always trying to live long. So the whole idea is that we have this face, we have these parts and features in our face that are here to help us on our journey, on our path. And in face reading, every feature and, you know, the eyebrows, the eyes, the nose, they all mean something. We also have the organs on the face that represent where we can see imbalances in particular organs. And I'll go through some of those that will be relevant to what we're talking about. But it's basically that we have our constitution and we have our journey, and it's to preserve that, what we have, and so that we can live a long, healthy, happy life and fulfill our destiny. When we have this, we're not just talking about how our physical body functions, we're talking about how our mind and how we think about things, and how we cultivate that part of ourselves, to do with meditation, to do different things. It's also about our attitudes and beliefs, you know, and this is a big thing now because, you know, there's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of, you know, we're bombarded with information, and how do we sieve through that and know what's real and what's not? And that's very much about being centered within ourselves, and what feels right for ourselves is really important. It's also about how we think about the world around us. We don't live in this world on our own. We live in the world with other people from other cultures, with other ideals. We live with animals, we live with nature. We're not here on our own, and therefore we have to be aware of our environment and how we contribute to it and how we interact with it. And so that has a lot to do with our Shen, you know. Our Shen is all about our consciousness and being able to understand our, you know, that we're in a certain situation and how do we behave in that situation. Shen helps us do that. So these are the four, and also maintaining that constitution, maintaining our health. I could have a really strong constitution and somebody else was born with a weaker constitution, but that doesn't mean I'm going to live a healthier life than the person with the weaker constitution. Usually somebody with the stronger constitution, they tend to abuse themselves a little more because they can and they can get away with it, where somebody with the weaker constitution is more mindful and they don't overindulge and they don't do the things. So the chances are they'll stay healthier longer. But it is really about understanding your own constitution. We're all here together, but we're not all the same. Every single one of us is different. Like, I hate horror movies. I can't watch anything where somebody's being killed. I love going to the theatre. My husband hates the theatre. Do you know what I mean? Somebody else loves, loves those horror movies and where, the awful things where you'd have nightmares. I like certain foods, I don't like other foods. You know what I mean? Some things make me laugh, other things make me cry. But it's different for everybody, and we have to understand that and acknowledge that as well. So yes, it's all about, and I love this because it's, for me in the clinic, it's a self-discovery for the patient. I try to help them, find bits of themselves that they might have left behind, that they might have lost as they've gone through life and life circumstances, and try to get them back in touch with those little parts of themselves that actually are really important. Those moments, those things we do that we love, that feed our souls, So we're on a journey, we're on a path, and our path is different from everybody else's. And it doesn't have to be a big path, it can be a little path, but we're here for a reason. And our spiritual aspect of it is really important. So there's many different aspects of Yang Shang, but these are the four main areas, and within those areas there's lots and lots of areas. And there's lots of, Peter Dedman wrote a book about Yang Shang as well, and he goes through a lot of the ancient texts and principles and stuff like that. What I'm going to try to do today is just use the ones that are valuable, that I use in the clinic, and the things that I feel are important. But there are many other aspects. But there's really four main areas when you break it down. And the first area is about cultivating the mind and the spirit. So this is about our mental and emotional health. Now, I put a lot of stuff on the slides because you don't have handouts and you'll have access to the recordings, right? Yes. And so you'll be able to look back and take notes and stuff. So it's about living in harmony with nature. If we live in harmony with the rhythms of life, then we can lead happy lives. We can live well in our lives. But it's all about our spirit and our constitution and having the vehicle in order for the spirit to be present. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The other area, that should be down here, our mental, emotional, living in harmony. This is there's a jump there. The living in harmony is the second one. So that should be here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I was thinking, wow, that was a bit odd. The other one then is cultivating the body. So that's about having balance in our lives between rest and activity, between work and leisure, between sleep and activity. And this is about finding that balance that suits the individual person. Again, we all shouldn't be doing high impact exercises, if our body can't manage that, or if we're at a certain age and we haven't been doing it on a regular basis. So there needs to be some sort of a balance with that, and that we find the right type of exercise and activity that suits our lifestyle and our constitution. And then regulation of the diet. This is about eating the right foods to help us physically and emotionally to balance. And what I've done is you'll see that I've given lists of foods that are very good for certain conditions. So what I do is that if somebody comes in and they're dealing with something, say there's, I don't know, digestive problems or headaches or whatever it is, thyroid issues or hormonal imbalance, I will make lists of foods that are really good for, say, clearing heat if there's a lot of heat, for balancing hormones if there's a hormone issue, and I've given you some of these here. And so what I do is say, okay, these foods all help tonify blood, build blood. These foods all help clear heat. And then I get them to pick the ones they like, because they're not going to like all the foods that are on the list. But if I give them enough of a variety with the top ones at the beginning, then I know that they can start introducing these foods into their diet. So I help them add things in that are used medicinally to help them balance. So I'm treating them as well, but they're doing this at home. And I think, you know, food is a great way of treating people, but it's getting the right balance with that. And so, yes, and understanding what we need as opposed to what we want. That's a big thing. You know, we all want to eat the chips or whatever, but they're not necessarily what we need. So the cultivating of the mind and spirit is very much, when we talk about spirit, and I know I'm repeating things that you already know, because we're all here practitioners for a long time, but what's important about the spirit is divided into 5 aspects. So I always think of it like an octopus with 5 legs. You know, we have one spirit that comes in and then divides off, and each spirit has its own job, it has its own function, it does something. And so, but it's all connected to the one. And this is what the spirit comes in. It's like a prism that goes around to the body. And when we have the spirit come in, the spirit that resides in the heart is the spirit that is related to our thinking. It's related to our mental activity. It's to do with recalling information, but also to understand our situation. Like I'm standing in front of a room and I'm lecturing. It's inappropriate for me to tell a certain type of joke. You know what I mean? You understand your place, or you understand how to read the situation. And this is what the heart, the spirit that resides in the heart, the Shem, is about. It's also about being able to recognize your place in this environment and who you are and how you're interacting. So it's very much about that connection with other people and the environment and what we're doing. So if that heart is anyway out of balance, that aspect of Shen gets thrown out of balance and things become a little bit more murky. Like I remember I had a friend who her heart Shen was just all over the place. And she would laugh in this hysterical, like high-pitched laugh at things that actually didn't warrant that kind of laugh. Like it wasn't that funny or just what, but she had no sense of, everything was extreme or it was, you know, not functioning at all. And that's very much fire. Heart is fire, and fire can go out of control. So the emotions then start to jump around, and 1 minute you're laughing and the next minute you're crying. And it's that kind of activity. So when heart is out of balance, it can be how people think then starts to get muddled, you know? And so that also consciousness, yeah, it throws everything off. The heart also recognizes all the emotions because it's the main center, the heart. And so it recognizes all the other emotions, and because it recognizes them, it can be affected by them. If that other organ isn't managing their emotion properly over a long period of time, it'll start to affect the heart, the spirit itself, the main area. When the spirit is strong, then the person is present and is more conscious. So the Po spirit then is the spirit that comes in with the Shen. So it actually, it's the first one, it comes in during in vitro. So when the baby's developing and the first coming together of the postnatal and prenatal gene comes together, the PO comes in at that point. The PO gives us our physical boundaries. It's also related to the metal element, which is the lung. So it's about our protection between the external world and what's going inside the body. And this is both in a physical way to do with our health and our Wei Qi, but it's also to do with our boundaries in life and our boundaries around our environment and people and that. So it's about our sense of physical space. It's about our ability for movement because it's the physical Po. The Po is about activity and physical. And so it's about our coordination with movement and balance. The Shen, it's the very physical aspect of Jing and the physical aspect of Shen, sorry. What you notice sometimes, and I don't know if you've noticed this, I've noticed this with my patients, kids who would have had chronic lung issues or are born with asthma. I would always ask the parent, you know, when they're out in school and they're out in the pitch playing and they're picking, you know, who's going to be on whose team, do their kids like jump up and down and say, pick me, or are they right in the front? Or do they step back and wait, you know, unsure to be picked? And a lot of them told me, yes, they're not really sure about, you know, if they're being accepted or not. Now, it's not that they're being rejected, it's their boundaries are unclear because their lung energy is unclear. And so they are not sure whether they're included or not included. So they step back a lot and they tend to be more loners and stuff like that. And over the years, I always asked the mothers and fathers of kids with lung problems just to see if there is a correlation with this. And there definitely is. There is this lack of ability to know that they're being included because their boundaries are murky. And so that tells you also that there will be an issue with boundaries for somebody like that as they grow up. And to be able to encourage the parents in some way to teach them that it's okay to create boundaries and have their own space. And it can be hard, like working with children is quite difficult because you're working with their parents really. But it is about trying to instill in them to help their kids develop some sort of social boundaries, because that's a weakness in their, you know, in their constitution. As they get stronger and as the lungs get stronger, those boundaries become stronger as well. But it's also about our Wei Qi and protecting us from the external pathogens. When we look at where we see issues with lung issues and with the Po, where there is deficiencies in that, we look at the cheek area. And the cheek area in relation to the organs is the metal, is the lung area. So this area here, the cheekbones into the cheek area, we can see lung deficiencies, and we can see also the emotion relation to that, which is grief and sadness. And so I will show you some stuff there. The Hun then is my favorite, because the Hun is the ethereal soul, and it comes in a few days after we're born. And it is the spirit that's still connected to the source of where we came from. Now, we are spirit beings, and we've manifested ourselves in a three-dimensional environment, in a three-dimensional form, but we're actually still connected to the source of where we've come from. And so the Hun is the spirit that goes back and reports and keeps us connected to that, to our main spirit, where we came from. This is my belief, and the belief of that from thousands of years. It's related to our sight and seeing, but it's also related to seeing beyond the three-dimensional. It's also about psychic seeing. It's about being able to see beyond what we're looking at, if that makes sense. The Hun, they say in daytime, the Hun is in the eyes, And we can see, and at night the hun is in the liver and we dream. The hun, when it's going, the Chinese would always say, don't have a mirror in your bedroom where you can see yourself when you're in bed. And the reason was because the hun leaves at nighttime when we sleep. And so you know that moment where there's this little jerking moment where somebody just falls asleep? They say that's the hun leaving. And if the hun can't leave, then you will see sleepwalking and talking in the sleep, because the hun is trying to go and it takes the body with them. So the hun starts to move. But if the hun sees itself when it comes out, when it leaves at nighttime in the mirror, it gets a fright and it'll disturb your sleep and can't go. So that's where, if any of you know about feng shui, they would always say that from many thousands of years ago. Well, whenever they started having mirrors, don't have a mirror where you can see it when you're in bed.
Also, the Irish tradition of not having a mirror being waked, you know, if they're
Yes,
at home.
that's right, yeah. So the spirit is able to, move on. So there's Elizabeth Della Roche, I don't know if I've said her name. She does she's talked a little bit about the hun in her book on the Shen. She has some lovely books on different things, and she does translations and stuff. And so some of this stuff I got from some of her books. But yes, she would talk about the hun and that. And then there's this other part is that the hun goes back and passes on the information of how we're doing. You know, it's kind of the voice of, okay, they're down here to do this, they're not doing it, they're off their path. There's this like telling, there's this idea that the hun goes back and reports on us to all the consciousness around. So it's the consciousness that continues to exist in more subtle realms. It sees the other world. Where we see issues with the hun is on the liver parts of the face. And a lot of times where we see this is in the temple area. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. The temple area is where we see where somebody wants to altered spaces. They want to be in an altered place. They want to leave, kind of thing. And sometimes it can be just somebody who wants to meditate a lot and just recluse back. And sometimes it can be more extreme where somebody's doing a lot of drugs and alcohol. And it depends on the color and it depends on the indentation. And I have some pictures of some patients and some different people with that, and I'll show that. But that's showing that there is a disconnect. Again, we always want to be connected and grounded. So the hun comes back in the morning or when we wake up at some point and comes back. So we've got the hun here. The yi and the zi, which is the yi is to do with the spleen and the zi is to do with the kidneys. They're not so, they're more to do with the function of the body and the function of those organs. With the spleen is about concentration, focus and memory. And that's why the Chinese would always say that you should never study while you're eating or watching something awful on the TV or having an argument, because that interferes with the digestion. And then it interferes with how you take in the information and your memory and how you recall it then. So it interferes with that whole thing. It's also the concept of digestion and digesting information. So what we see with the spleen is taking in nourishment through the mouth, and the mouth is the area where we see the digestive system. It's about taking in nourishment for ourselves, but it's also about taking in information and being able to assimilate that information, just like we take in food, and break it down into usable information. So when the spleen is out of balance, that becomes out of balance as well. And it's not so easy to understand the information we're taking it in, digesting it, and taking the parts of it that are suitable and we need for ourselves. And so it's about forming ideas as well. And we see a marking, sometimes a line across the bridge of the nose where it kind of folds over. And that can be an indication of somebody who's rejecting information, doesn't want any new information in. And we also see it when somebody holds their mouth very closed, very tight, holds it very tight. Then that's an indication as well that they're rejecting something, information, or taking in information. So weak digestion leads to unclear thinking, slow thinking, poor responding, poor memory. So we need that. And as I said, the bridge of the nose and the lips are the two areas that we can see issues with digestion, and we can see issues in that area. And then the will, the Z, is about it resides in the kidney, and this is about our will to stand in our own power, our will to be present and face life demands. Like, life comes at us and we've lots of things to do all the time, and we need this strength in order to face whatever comes at us and to deal with it. And because the kidneys naturally, the body naturally declines as we get older, you see as people get older, and I saw this with my dad, who was very, dynamic and, wasn't afraid of anything. And as he got older, he became more overwhelmed by little things like paying bills or dealing with, anything, somebody having to deal with an issue. He just became very overwhelmed, and that was was depleted. His kidney energy was depleting, the spirit was depleting. So he wasn't able to face the things that were coming at it. It's a very strong, powerful spirit. And it is a spirit that it's important in that we have to push our will. And part of that, we look at the chin. And the chin is the area where we see this will. And when somebody pushes their chin out and says no, it's very different from somebody who pulls their chin back and says no. There is a definite pushing out. So we would always tell people to hold their head up and push your chin out if you're trying to make a stand or you're trying to be present, because that's your will being pushed. And we see that when somebody's will is not strong, the kidney energy is not strong, then we see a little more fear coming in, a little more fearful, a little bit more overwhelmed. And then we start to see puckering in the chin area. And it's very hard to mark the chin because it's a bone. And a lot of the markings we got on the face is from expressions that we use. But it's very hard if you try to make expressions to mark your chin. But when we see dimpling or marking in the chin area, then we're saying that there is a lack of will, or there is some fear there in the person. And also we see with the kidney area and with issues with kidney, we see the philtrum area. And the philtrum area is the area between the under the nose to the tip of the lip. And this is the area where we see creativity in somebody. And we are creative beings. So this is where we look to see if somebody's using that creativity, how much creativity do they have? Are they giving it away for somebody else at their own expense? But it's also the area where we see fertility, because creating a new human being, creating a life, creating a piece of art, it's all to do with creating. And so we see a lot of gynecological issues in this area, and it's where we see it both in men and women. So we see prostate, we see the uterus. And I have some pictures to show you of a couple of things that relate to that. So the Shen. So working in the clinic, so this is all about practical things. I always show the little, because this is what we see clear Shen. Because you say to somebody, Shen is what you see, the sparkle in the eye, and it's clear and it's, direct. The best place to see it is in a newborn baby, because they just have that presence in their eyes. There's just so clear. It's really, it's a direct, clear contact and movement and conversation. When the Shen is present, and I find this in the clinic with a patient, and they come in and their Shen is scattered. They don't look at you when they come in. They're looking around the room, admiring all the things in the room. They sit down and you ask them a question about their digestion, and next minute they're telling you about their holiday and what they ate and how, you have to keep pulling them back. They find it very hard to keep eye contact. That's a scattered Shen. So as a face reader, we learn to read Shen. It's the most important thing to read because it gives us so much information. When you're looking at somebody and you ask them a question about something, the Shen will either be present or you'll see it go. Have you all witnessed that, where you're looking at somebody and next minute their eyes dart and they're not, you can see they've gone and then they come back. When they come back, there's something important. When they go, there's something important. Why are they going? What did you say? What did you ask them? So you have to go back in and ask them again from a different direction and find out what it is that's, the Shen is disconnecting. Is it because it's uncomfortable? Is it, like, for instance, asking somebody about, we had, working with Lillian, we had some students, and at the end we did 5 days workshops of face reading in the program. And on the last day, everybody got to read strangers, and we would literally take people off the street and ask them, do they want their face read? And they would come in and they would read. And there was these 3 students with this one girl, and they came up to us and they said, this is kind of really weird, she's got really chronic illness, and she's very sick. But we notice when she talks about her illness, she's very present, like her Shen is very clear. But when we ask her about, getting better, and she talks about, getting better, her Shen goes, like her spirit leaves. So we said, okay, go back and ask her about her life. And how is her life being sick? And what would her life be if she was better? She hated doing school runs. Hated the whole thing. I think she was a woman who had kids and it was too much for her. And so when she was sick, her husband brought the kids to school. People picked them up. Things were done for her. And so for her, getting better meant that she was going to have to go back to this life that she was obviously unhappy with. And this wasn't what she wanted. So for her to be sick meant everybody rallied around her and minded her. It was really interesting, just from that flicker of the eyes, you were able to see she has an investment. Her Shen likes this. I want to be sick. I get minded. So it gives us a lot of information. So I'm always, when I'm asking questions, watching the Shen. Sometimes we get this glazed, glossy look over the eyes, and that can be medication. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. There's no light in the eyes, or it's dead, or the person's not able to make eye contact. But that glassiness can a lot of times be medication. And block Shen, unfortunately, also can impede recovery from illness, because if somebody's not present and they don't want to get better, and they're not understanding clearly the guidelines you're giving them, then your prognosis isn't going to be good. I have this one person coming to me right now for sleep apnea, and his wife recommended him to come. I don't think he ever wanted to come. Anyway, he comes every week and tells me no change, no change, no change. But I go to his wife for treatments, and she says to me, oh my God, I can't believe the change in him. Like he's not waking up as often, he's like sleeping, like he wakes up 2 or 3 times, but he used to be all the time. And like no matter how much I quiz him, he's not stressed. The guy is stressed out of his mind. He's, no change, it's interesting, he just isn't present. So for him, everything is the same. But it's also interesting, I had somebody who had a shoulder problem, for a year. Every night was woken up with it, every day had pain. And I treated her, and she came back the week later and she said there was no change. So I thought, okay, treated her again, no change. And then the 3rd time I decided to ask her, was there any change after the first treatment, even for an hour or 2? And she said, oh yeah, it was great up until the day before, like for 6 days. And I said to her, but do you not think that's good? That 6 days out of 7 you were pain free, but it was only 1 day. But for her, because the pain came back, it was the same, even though it was 1 day. So there's a non-consciousness there, if that makes sense, of somebody not being aware of themselves. And this is where all of this, the Shen comes in. Now, I want to show you a few pictures as well. So when we look at Shen and the emotion, the kidneys related to fear, dread and terror. So the Shen becomes dark and murky. When the liver is affected with anger and frustration, then the Shen becomes intense and projected. And we'll see some pictures. The heart, when it's excitement, hysteria, mania, which are all emotions related to the heart, then the Shen becomes scattered and glazed. Worry then, with anxiety, the Shen becomes confused and shallow, and with grief, the Shen becomes dull and vacant. So I've just put some pictures together there so you can, yeah?
A quick question on the previous slide. Could you explain what you mean by projected?
Projected means direct. So look, that's projected. It's very direct. It's directing it at you. You know, it's that direct. So this is Kurt Cobain. Like, he's got a lot of fear and this startled in the headlights kind of look. There's a photograph I have of him before he committed suicide, and he has a very direct, excuse my language, fuck you look on his face. Like, if you saw the difference between the two. This one was, he was struggling a lot. You can see he burnt his forehead with the cigarette, and he was really struggling emotionally. I'm going to show you some more pictures of these because these are very interesting photographs, but this is very direct and projected. Bit confused and lost, a little bit scattered and glazed, you know. She's quite present and piercy, but very glazed, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. This is very fire, and then you can see a bit of sadness. But can you see, when you look in the pictures, in the eyes, can you see the emotion behind them? So one of the things then is to, when you're looking at a patient, is to try and block off the rest of the face and just look at the eyes as much as possible and see what's really going on with somebody, because that gives you so much information about a person and what you're dealing with and what's behind it. This is somebody on medication, and you can see very glazed look. So she's still on medication in this one, but this is after a few treatments, so there's a little more clarity in there, but still that sort of lost look. Very depressed. This patient was very depressed, but just a little more present, but still very glossy. And that's the problem with medication, is medication blocks the Shen, and it's very hard to reconnect that when they're on it. And you can't obviously tell people to come off medication, but you can try and get them to be as strong as possible so they feel they can start to wean off at some point, and that would be the goal. But it is hard to do. Is this all okay? Is this so this is a photographer. She's Danish, I think. And she takes photographs of people. And she took photographs of a load of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds from England who were going to Afghanistan. And they were new recruits. And so she took pictures before they were recruited. She took pictures while they were in Afghanistan. And she took pictures when they came back. And it's incredible. But you know what the most incredible thing is? Where is the spirit mostly present? In the middle one. Because they have to. Spirit has to be present. You have to keep yourself alive. You have to work with the people, the other people. It's about survival. So the spirit becomes very present and very focused. It's really interesting, isn't it? I love these pictures. She did a whole series of it. This is the whole face when you look at the whole person. So he was quite lost when he went, a bit more focused, but it didn't do him any good there. He became much more lost and very sad, actually. But yeah, very interesting. This is interesting again. So again, very focused and very clear, but came back very angry. So we see so much. And again, this is the face. I would not like to meet him. Whatever, yeah, very difficult. And now, these are just the areas we talk about in the temple area. So this is a patient of mine. You can see that there's darkness in this area. When there's a hollowing in the temple area, this is the liver area. This is where we see a desire to escape. So it can be addictions, but it can also, as I said, it can be being enlightened. And we see that it's not dark. So it's just indentated. There's no darkness. Sometimes when we see it nice and puffy in that area, it means somebody is really happy to be present and to be here, on the planet, in the life they're in. So we do see that. But when it's like this one is indentated, but it's not very dark. This one is indentated, but she came to me. She never had darkness in that area. And she had been suffering with depression for a little bit. Now, I've seen her over the years, for many years. She disappears and then comes back. And but she was suffering a little bit with depression, and it got a little bit dark. After treatments and after I talked to her about, are you feeling depressed? And she admitted it and then did some work. That next time, a few weeks later, that was gone. The darkness isn't a permanent thing. It was just showing up because she was going into a dark space. But when it's very dark and indentated, and his is quite dark, this is an actor. Yeah, now he had just finished making a movie. He was directing and playing in the movie. And if you saw his whole face, he's very depleted. He's very hollowed in here. And he admits that he suffers from depression and that. And so his got a little bit indentated and dark. When somebody has, now he hasn't got, he just goes into a very dark space, but he doesn't have a drug or alcohol problem. But sometimes you do see when it's very indentated and very dark that it can be somebody has some sort of a depression. They don't want to be here. They want to be gone. So they might drink or they might do drugs or something like that. But it is that feeling. And he has this band going across the head here. Sometimes we see a band going there. And that's really a feeling of overwhelmness, helplessness that we see in there. So I'm showing you these because one of the first things I'm doing is reading the Shen. And part of reading the Shen is looking at the emotions and seeing what's going on with somebody and how can I get in there and help them in some way. Because you can't jump into conversations about things. You have to know the person. They need to build confidence with you, and then you can go a little further with talking with them. But also it's a great gauge to see how treatments are doing, how one is doing with their treatments. It's absolutely fascinating, the face, when you start working with the diagnosis of the face. It just is really changed my whole practice, I have to admit. It's been great. But this is where we see that, so we look for that. So considerations, this is for Shen, we need to look at a work and home life. So, if somebody doesn't have time for themselves. I see this a lot more with women than I see with men. They're a lot of times they're working. They also are picking the kids up and doing the shopping and maintaining the house. Now there's a lot more involvement with men and partners, I should say now, than there used to be when I was growing up. But it's still very much the woman, a lot of it falls on her. And if you ask a lot of women, what do they do just for themselves? Or where do they have that's in their house that's just theirs, like that they can go in and be still? There's very little. They're the last person to think about themselves, is themselves, you know? And so you want to know, you want to help them find that space, even if it's just going for a walk with a friend, or, you know, getting away and having that space by themselves is really important. You want to look at the emotions. Sleep is hugely important for the spirit. Sleep is a big factor in rejuvenation, of getting strong again. We recover, we regain our jing when we sleep, and so it's really important. The level of exercise is important, because when we exercise and we move that qi, then it's also good for the spirit. So it's about keeping the body well so the spirit can reside and be healthy and be able to function. There's a lot of environmental factors that interfere with spirit and interfere with our health. And that's modern day environmental stuff, like on the screens all the time, electromagnetic field interfering with our whole vibration. So there's a lot of things that we have to deal with. So when we talk about sleep, which is part of the whole principle of Yang Shang, is looking at somebody's sleep, having your phones plugged in beside your bed is not good. Having anything with the blue light in the room, like a TV or anything like that, it interferes with the pineal gland, and the pineal gland thinks it's daytime. And so that interferes with how deeply we sleep. If you've things plugged in on either side of the bed, like lamps, that frequency can interfere. And you know, I talk to people who do electrics and they go, no, that's not true. But I remember a friend of mine's sister got this big rash on her face, and they were coming by the clinic one day to pick something up, and her sister was with her, and she said to me, would you just have a quick look at her? Now, her sister had just got braces. And so she was in her 40s and she had these big braces on, and her whole face was all red and swollen. And she wore these big earrings as well. So I said, take the earrings off, because maybe the metals are connecting and creating a frequency. And she took the earrings out and her face cleared up. And so as long as she was wearing her braces, she didn't wear her earrings, because but it was it was interesting. And it was Dr. Nogier was the one who alerted me to this kind of thing. And that whole thing about the metal connecting, and also, you know, we have amalgams in our teeth or whatever. And so it was creating a frequency. So if that's creating a frequency, so is the electrical plugs on either side of your bed with your electric clock and your lamp or something in there. So 3 feet, put your phone 3 feet away from where your head is at night time. So even if you put it on the other side of the room, get a wind-up clock with a battery and put it there if you need to have a clock. But move away from if you're having sleep issues, because it is a problem. The other thing and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, because again, I think this is a big factor in people's health and their recovery, is foods and additives and, you know, chemicals in our environment that people really don't realize what they're doing on a daily basis to themselves. So things like, we'll talk about those, but strong stimulants, alcohol, sugar before you go to bed, processed foods have too much sugar or salts in them and causes dehydration, which is a big issue, and alcohol. And all of these things become an issue with these things. So then I'm just going to give you some foods that if somebody's Shen is out of balance, that there's foods that people can eat that are really good. And you'll see that a lot of the foods like blueberries, also great antioxidants if you're thinking of it from a Western point of view. I'm going to talk a little bit about immunity later, or maybe, I'm not sure when, immunity. And, you know, one of the things during COVID was there was certain supplements that helped support the body to fight COVID because it was an inflammatory condition. It attacked the body in that way. Yes, you can take a photograph.
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, do, yeah. You know, there's certain foods that are high in things that reduce inflammation. And so foods that calm the Shen are blueberries, avocados, asparagus, kale, spinach, dark green vegetables, all dark green vegetables, sweet potatoes, almonds, walnuts, salmon and turkey. Now, all foods have properties of, they're either neutral, cool, they're same as herbs. They all have temperature properties, they all have flavors, they all go into certain organs, and some of them have very specific medical treatments. You know, they're very specific to treating certain things. And so in some instance, I'm going to give you those, what they exactly are. But these are just really, you know, generally, these foods are very good to calm the Shen. Good fats like coconut oil, olive oil, flaxseed oils all also help calm the Shen and help balance emotions. They're antioxidants, they're high in omega-3s, if you're looking at it from a Western point of view, and they all are very good for the Shen and the spirit. Chamomile, really good for sleep, depression, and it calms and relaxes the body and the central nervous system. So it's really good. And that's a traditional, people all know about how chamomile can help you sleep at night. Saffron is really good to lift the mood, especially if somebody has depression. So adding saffron into their cooking, or just putting a couple of strands of saffron in some warm water and drinking it a little bit like that. I use herbs as food as well, so I add in certain herbs into the foods when I'm recommending, so they're getting some benefit. And beetroot benefits the blood, and remember, blood is what houses, supports the heart and allows the Shen to have somewhere to anchor in. It also calms the spirit and cleanses the liver. So that means that there's also movement and a free flow of qi. Tomatoes clear heat and are anti-inflammatory and are really good for the heart, if there's any heart issues. And figs are really good to lower blood pressure, which also has an effect on the Shen, but also really high in calcium. So you don't, somebody who doesn't eat dairy, one fig gives you something like 65% of your calcium or something like that, a fresh fig, not dried. Pomegranates, really great, reduce inflammation. It's especially really good for kidney and bladder, and it has been linked to helping people with bladder cancer and kidney issues. It's high in antioxidants, it also lowers cholesterol, and it also strengthens the gums and kills intestinal worms. With strengthening the gums, the gums are very linked to the heart. There's a lot of research to show now that our gum health has a direct effect on the heart. And so these pomegranate is really good to help that. Now I'm very lucky, I go to America quite frequently, and I go to California where they're all into their health food. And I bring back little bags of organic pomegranate powder, Acea powder, mulberry powder, and it's all organic and it's all great. And then I sprinkle it into salad dressings or into my porridge or on my yogurt. If I'm having yogurt, I use them or put them in juices during the summer. But you can also buy, pomegranates are very common in the supermarkets now. And cherry benefits the whole body, and it rejuvenates, and also is one of the longevity foods that the Chinese would have used. And they would say that the cherries also are really good for the heart. Any red food, red is the color of the fire element. So when you're looking at foods, the color of a food benefits that organ as well. So it has multiple things. So because cherries and pomegranates and tomatoes are red and beetroot, they also have that extra, they benefit the heart. Cherries, they say that if you eat too many cherries that you can get a rash. So cherries give you longevity, but don't do too much of a good thing because it will actually turn not so good. And then the herbs. So what I do with herbs, I have a pharmacy of the raw herbs, and I make teas up I give formulas to patients. But if patients don't want to do the teas, and they don't want to have to deal with all of that, then what I do is I try to encourage them to make foods and add 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 herbs into the food where it doesn't overpower, so they're not tasting the herbs, but they're getting a little bit of something in their diet with the foods I'm recommending as well. So I'm using them as a food. And what I do is sometimes I make up little bags, say for somebody who's been going through cancer and they are very yin deficient and I want to tonify qi and yin and build their blood up. I would use huang qi, maybe dong shen, shan yao, and something else maybe for the shen, maybe dat zao to help the middle jiao. And then I get them to boil it up and make it into a stock. And they can put the stock in their ice cube things. So if they're making something like a rice, or they're making a soup, or they're making something, that they can put that into their part of it and melt it into it, so it's there in the freezer. And that they're having it then maybe 3 or 4 times a week in their food. Or if they're making soups, to add in the herbs and cook the herbs in the soups and then take the herbs out. And then they have that in there. It's not enough that overpowers the flavor, but it's enough to keep a little bit in the system. And it's it's something I started doing with a couple of people, particularly, people going through cancer. A lot of them are nervous about taking herbs when they're doing stuff. So then I'd say, okay, well, look, these are food grade herbs. So just make a little stock and add them in. And it really made a difference. And that's how I started to do more and more of it. But the dat zao is really good for middle jiao. It nourishes qi and blood. And it also calms the shen. So it's very good for palpitations, insomnia, night sweats, and also because it helps the middle jiao for diarrhea. Lychee fruit nourishes the blood and calms the shen, and it also smooths and relaxes the liver qi. So in deficient conditions such as blood deficiency, I would get them, and this is a recipe from one of my teachers, 7 dried lychee fruits, you can do fresh, with the seeds, and then 7 dried dates, and just boil it up into a tea and get them to drink that every day. And so the tea will hold for 3 to 4 days in the fridge. They can just heat it up and drink it. The lychee fruit, usually you can sometimes get it dried for the pharmacy, but they can get it fresh. You can get it fresh in a lot of supermarkets now. Yeah.
The Asian market.
In the Asian markets, definitely, yeah. And sometimes I see them in Marks and Spencer's and places like that as well. Yeah, I think more the English supermarkets tend to have it more than the Irish ones, but yeah, you can get. I think you can also, in the Asian market in town, there's a whole row of dried herbs there that are medicinal, and I think they might have them there as well. Yeah.
Sort of the Southeast Asian ones like Thai and
yeah, there's shops that just sell those kind of Asian things. So a lot of times, like there's a really good one in Camden Street. Is it Camden Street in Dublin?
Yeah, that's got the Asian market.
Yeah, the Asian market. And you can buy stuff online from them as well. you know. And actually what's interesting, they also have little packages of soup mixes for different conditions there as well. People buy them and they make up their soup. So in China, you know, it's very much part of the culture there. So if somebody wasn't feeling well or after a baby or stuff, you know, they would naturally be building up and putting herbs in. So they used herbs very much as food. Swanzhao Ren is another one. It's really good for heart yin and liver blood, and it also quiets the Shen. It's good with Bai Shao and Dong Gui and Hush Shao Wu for irritability, insomnia and anxiety. And so this is something that a lot of women perimenopause and menopausal tend to suffer a lot with that. And so this is a nice little combination that actually works really well with the Swanzhao Ren. And it's just 4 herbs, and it's easy for people to do. The Baitsa Ren nourishes the heart and calms the spirit. It's also, because it's a seed, it's really good for the intestines. So it's really good for any kind of dryness in the intestines and help moving it. And then Lingzhu, which is reishi mushrooms, is also really good for calming the Shen. It's really good for immunity. It's really good to build up white blood counts to protect us from infections, and it also is really beneficial for heart blood. So it's a really, really good one.
Can I ask you, on your little recipe there with 4 herbs in it, do you use them equally?
Yeah, usually, yeah, I would, on that one there, yes. I would probably, I don't know how to go back. Oh yeah, so yes, I would do it equally and say, you know, 40 grams in total. Do you know what I mean? Something very small. So 10 grams of each, and then just do that, yeah. And then get them to dilute it down. If they don't like the taste, just dilute it down, but they're getting a little bit of something. So I'm always thinking, I see them once a week. You know, if they're not taking the herbs, what are they doing the rest of the week? So I really try to get them to do little things of that. We're okay? We'll go. So then, yes, so good fats, I mentioned them earlier. Actually, this might be a double up. The B vitamins are really good to help with mood and depression and lift that energy. And molasses is a really good food that has lots of the B vitamins, and particularly good if somebody's vegetarian, that they would use molasses in some of their making dressings or something. I make a bread, I think the recipe's in the book, with all seeds, so there's no gluten or anything. And I put loads of molasses in it as well to help have the B complex there. Raw dark chocolate, really high in magnesium, and magnesium helps relax the body. So the reason I'm doing it this way is I'm giving you the foods, but also, you know, we know the supplements and we hear about the supplements, but all the foods have a lot of these supplements in it. So I'm kind of doubling up so you can see that also magnesium, and this is in magnesium. It reduces sleep and is really good to help, it reduces stress and really good to help people sleep. So, and raw dark chocolate. So chocolate is okay, but the darker the chocolate, the better. The more milk chocolate, the more milkier it is, the more other processed stuff is in it, the more dairy that's in it, the more other things are in it. So not so good for you, and you have less magnesium, so you're going to have less of an effect. It's going to be higher sugar, so it's going to keep you awake, as opposed to the darker has less sugars, and it then has more magnesium, and it helps you sleep better. And again, here are some more berries that are good. Goji berries, green leafy vegetables. Some of this is all doubling up, but these are all antioxidants which also help benefit the body. And then zinc, oysters, pumpkin seeds are very high in zinc, which also is very good for the whole body's immune system to keep us strong. Just going to do this and then we'll take a break. Is this okay? Mm-hmm. So Jing and Shen is very important. Shen forms life with Po and Hun. So they're the main spirits that are connected, the physical form and the bringing us back. Qi is related to spleen, stomach, lungs, and that is where we get our postnatal Jing from. So when the two people come together, you have Ling energy, which is cosmic energy, and you have the physical two people coming together to form a new human being. That's postnatal. So you have the two people's energy and the cosmic energy. So that's why they say that in babies born in war zones and different places that they can have post-traumatic stress things as they get older, because the environment around them is chaotic when they were born. So very much the Chinese would look at that and go, okay, your environment becomes really important when you're going to create a new human being. And then after that, how we support our digestive system, what we eat, and also breathing deeply and taking in proper breath into our body. We take in the breath, we have the food, they work together to create our Jing Qi and our Wei Qi. And this supports our whole being. And then this, in turn, then helps to build blood to support the heart and the blood vessels. And then a strong Jing will make good Qi. And so this helps us to be strong and have a good spirit present. So these are all what we would look at in the Jing and Shen. There is the best place to see Jing is the ears. The bigger the ears on somebody, the stronger their Jing is. It's also to do with the flexibility of the ears. If the ears have good resistance in their flexibility, that's also strong Jing. If it's very loose and flaccid, then there's less Jing there. Now, Shen is bigger than Jing. If you have strong Shen, it'll override a weak Jing. You think about, the stories you hear about somebody, the kid gets stuck under a car and a woman goes and lifts the car up. That's pure Shen energy. The Shen comes in and goes, shoo. Now it only lasts a moment, but it's saying, look how strong that person's Shen and determination was. So the Shen is really important. But the big ears we also see it on the bones, like the forehead, the brow bone, the chin, the maxilla. These all are kidney areas where we see strong Shen. So when somebody has good, strong bones, that is also good Jing. There is areas where we lose Jing, and I'm going to just show you 3 places. But loss of Jing can be from inappropriate exercise for our own constitution. It can be either over sexual activity, because that also particularly men lose Jing through ejaculation. Also women lose Jing through their menstrual cycle each month, but hopefully it's a regular cycle and it's a small amount. But if there's problems in that and they're losing a lot of blood or they're bleeding for longer periods of time, then that's more Jing being lost. And so there needs to be a recovery after that. Also childbirth, pregnancy and childbirth, also women lose Jing through that as well. And again, that after recovery becomes more important, which in our culture we don't put enough emphasis on. Postpartum health is hugely important, particularly the first 4 to 6 weeks of a woman's life after she's given birth. And in Korea, they have hotels now. And you book in it's like going into kindergarten, you have to book in before the baby's born. As soon as you get pregnant, you book yourself in for the dates that you're due your baby. And when you have the baby, you go into these, you get your own room, TV, your food is delivered to your room, you have a menu, but they give you soups that in Chinese, they give you soups that help replenish blood and like with loads of mushrooms and herbs in it and stuff, like very therapeutic foods as well. There's nurses there that can take the baby, bring them in, you can have the baby in your room. There's classes to talk to people about breastfeeding and different issues. Like, it's amazing, and you can be there from 2 to 4 weeks. It's like these whole hotels now popping up in. And I know Korea is a big place for it. So living hard and fast and not getting enough rest. So that's that whole constantly going, and when are we rejuvenating? When are we stopping? And I know as practitioners it's very hard to do. I find it really hard to say no to my patients at my own expense. You know what I mean? And I sometimes have to go, well, actually, I'm not well. I need to have this day off. But I feel guilty because I feel I should be helping them all the time. And so there's that balance is really important. And I think for practitioners, it's really important. There was research done many years ago to say that if you were in a job where you worked on a one-to-one with patients, whether it was a counselor, acupuncturist, therapist, or whatever it was on a one-to-one, I think it was 17 patients was the top per week for health, 15 to 17, yeah, for you to be well, not the patient, and that every 3 months you should take 1 week away from your clinic completely. Every 3 months, 1 week completely. And that is how somebody who works like we do manages our own health. That's what's good for us, which is really hard to do, right?
It's very interesting in America because some of the practitioners, they're working with 30 a day or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So you always, when you read this, or I read it, I'm going, oh my God, I should
Yeah,
have
yeah.
another room. I should be, not staying
Yeah.
with the client or whatever it is.
Well,
But
I
everyone-
did that. I had a clinic where on some days there was 4 and 5 rooms available to me. And I remember one time calculating that I'd seen 60 people in 1 week. But I remember one of my patients turned around to me and said, you weren't really there, were you? Like made some comment about, and I suddenly thought, no, I'm putting the needles in, and I was running into the next room and putting needles in. And then I'd forgotten about him and came in, and he was just like, no, this isn't working for me. And I thought he did me a service because I actually started to change how I worked after that. And I went into my own place and I just have 1 room. Now, that's a hassle because you can't see somebody in an emergency, but it's definitely changed and I'm much better since then. But yeah, that's too crazy, too crazy. But I was younger. I was 20 years younger then. I had a bit more energy than I have now. Also mismanaging the diet and lifestyle and inadequate support, nutrition and breath. So we'll take a break now, but I just want to show you these markers. These markers are telling us that somebody is using up their Jing quicker than they should. And so this area here on the bridge of the nose is aged 40. It's actually, so age 40. This here is age 50, and this here is age 60. Now, if you have a line...
Sorry, I missed you there. Where is age 50?
50 is in the philtrum area here, yeah. Yeah.
So you're saying that at the point you shouldn't see it before those ages?
Before those ages.
Oh,
Yeah. So if you're already past it, but you should look at photographs before you were 40. Like there's certain times I tell a patient to bring in photographs of a few years back, 10 years back. So I can see, for instance, with thyroid issues, there can be a missing of eyebrows. But you don't know that unless you see what their eyebrows were before. So sometimes, but again, if it's there before you're 40, this means that you're not eating the right food for your body. This area here in the diagnostics is where we see the pancreas. So we see blood sugar irregularities here. If it's pale, then it's saying that somebody's blood sugar is going low, and if it's red and inflamed, then it might be going too high. But they're not regulating properly, the bridge of the nose, paleness. Now, I have seen this on young children who had chronic problems that eventually did end up with diabetes. And I tried to, in a nice way, warn the parents that they need to be careful with their sugars.
Is it a line or it's
That's a paleness. The line means it's a more permanent problem. But if you have a line there before somebody's 40, it's saying that they're eating foods on a regular basis that is not supporting their constitution. So they're depleting their Jing. They're not supporting their Jing energy. The same thing here. This is where we see age 50. This is where if you have a line here, now it can also be to do with fertility things where you see it a lot with postmenopause. Women have a line there, their fertility has been cut off. Sometimes we see it on younger people if they have not enough egg reserve and they're having fertility issues. But when you have a line there before 50, it's saying that you're not breathing. So what happens is when we inhale, there's a moment before we exhale. That moment between inhalation and exhalation is where we're in the quantum field. We're in nothing, no time, no place. So it's where we reconnect again with source. It's when that's why breathing is so important. We breathe deeply. We breathe slowly, we breathe in. So if somebody has a line there, then they're not breathing properly. They're not sometimes shallow breathing. You know, with yoga, it's so important to reconnect with the breath. The breath is huge, and even with Tai Chi and Qigong, it's, you know, very important. But it's saying that somebody is not being still. They're not stopping. They're not breathing. They're not in their creativity. They're not connecting with their environment. They're just going, 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 going. And that depletes your Jing energy as well. The other area is this area, which is age 60. And if you've a line there, and I see this a lot with younger and younger people all the time, it's saying that you're doing something on a regular basis that your body doesn't like. It can be a food, it can be a relationship, it can be a job, it can be an exercise, it can be anything. You have to figure it out. But there's something you're doing on a regular basis that your body doesn't like, and that's also depleting your Jing. And so I have a photograph here. You'll see here. This is a 14-year-old kid who, I got this out of a magazine. He's in his early 30s now. When he invented some app like, it's kind of like Instagram or something like that. He invented this app when he was 14 years old. And he became a multimillionaire by the time he was 16. And I think he sold his company for billions when he was like 18. Or I got a photograph of him when he was in his 20s, and his line was a little less. But look at that line at that age. Now, obviously, he was spending too much time on the screen, and that was depleting his Jing. And he's only 14 years old, you know. You can see it here as well. And these are the lines cutting across the philtrum area. And then here is the lines on the bridge of the nose. This is also quite pale, which says there's a sugar issue here as well. So those lines, so they're lines I look for on somebody, and then I want to know, what are they, especially this one you see very common. What are you doing? You know, I see this in 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds now. And when you stop doing it, the line will go away if you're not already 60. It's really interesting. The face changes shape and loses lines. Your nose will get bigger or smaller, your ears can grow, your chin. The face changes. It's not a stationary thing. So as things change, the face changes as well. So these are something to look out for as well. Should we take a little break then? Is this okay?